My wife, Cheryl, and I own a farm in Buckingham, Iowa. It's a small, peaceful town where the nights are quiet, the fields stretch on forever, and the nearest neighbor is a half-mile away. We've both spent our entire lives farming. It's all we've ever known, and for the most part, we love the life we've built here. But sometimes the same isolation that brings peace can also bring fear. It was a rainy night in August 2018, the kind of night that makes you want to cozy up inside, away from the damp chill. Cheryl and I had spent the evening with our neighbors, George and his wife, who lived just down the road. We'd invited them over for drinks and board games, a tradition we often enjoyed to break up the monotony of farm life. By the end of the night, we were all a little tipsy, laughing about George's antics during the game. Around 11 p.m., they decided to head home. Their drive was a short, straight shot, so we weren't worried about them braving the rain. After they left, Cheryl and I poured ourselves another glass of wine and settled onto the couch to watch one of our favorite movies. The soft rhythm of the rain on the windows, the glow of the TV, and the warmth of the wine made everything feel perfect. We were on the verge of dozing off when there was a sudden knock at the door. At first, I thought I imagined it. Cheryl's head snapped up and she gave me a curious look. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I grabbed the remote and muted the TV. For a moment, there was silence. But then the knock came again, louder this time. Accompanying it was a faint voice, barely audible over the rain. "We need help," it said. A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just the time. Late-night visitors were unheard of around here. It was the desperation in the voice. Cheryl grabbed my arm. "Don't open it," she said firmly. "Something's not right." I hesitated, torn between concern and caution. What if someone was genuinely in trouble? "I'm just going to ask who it is," I said quietly. Cheryl shook her head, but she didn't stop me as I approached the door. "Who's there?" I called out, keeping my voice steady. "Oh, thank God," a man's voice replied. "Can you open up? We're lost." The explanation didn't sit well with me. Lost? Here? On a rainy night like this? "Who's we?" I asked. "My wife and I," the man answered. I exchanged a glance with Cheryl, who was standing frozen near the couch. Something about his tone felt off, like he was straining to sound natural. "Can your wife say something?" I asked, testing him. There was a long pause before the man responded. "She's not next to me right now." The unease in my gut grew stronger. Cheryl mouthed, "Call someone," but I pressed on. If this was a prank, I needed to know. "George, is that you?" I asked, trying to lighten the tension. George had a reputation for goofy antics, and part of me hoped this was one of his drunken pranks. The voice faltered, then said, "Yeah," but his tone had shifted. It was deeper now, more deliberate. My stomach knotted. "Prove it," I said sharply. "What's your wife's name?" "That's a trick question," the man snapped. My heart raced. This wasn't George. I turned to Cheryl and whispered, "Call 911. She grabbed her phone immediately, her fingers trembling as she dialed. I went to get mine, deciding to call George directly. "Hey, George," I said when he picked up. "Are you at my front door right now?" "What? No. Why?" George sounded groggy, as if I'd just woken him. "There's someone here pretending to be you," I said, keeping my voice low. "He's trying to get me to open the door." "Stay inside," George said firmly. "I'll be there in 5 minutes." By now, Cheryl was on the phone with the dispatcher, explaining the situation. The knocking started again, louder and more insistent. "We just need to use a phone," the man yelled. His tone was no longer pleading, it was demanding. "I have a shotgun," I yelled back. "If you don't leave, I'll use it." The house fell silent for a moment, but then we heard footsteps circling the deck. Our wooden porch wrapped around the house, and the sound of boots on the planks made my heart pound. Cheryl gasped when one of the windows rattled. Someone was trying to lift it open. "Leave us alone!" Cheryl screamed into the phone. "They're trying to get in!" I bolted upstairs, grabbing my shotgun from the closet. My hands were shaking as I loaded it. The weight of the weapon offered some comfort, but my mind was racing. What if there were more than one of them? What if they got inside? Moments later, there was pounding at the door, followed by George's familiar voice shouting, "It's me! Open up!" Relief flooded through me as I rushed to unlock the door. George stepped inside, his shotgun at the ready. "I didn't see anyone on the way over," he said, his eyes scanning the room. We waited together until the police arrived, trying to keep calm while Cheryl stayed on the line with the dispatcher. The officer did a quick search of the property but didn't find anyone. "You should think about installing cameras," he said before leaving. That night changed everything for us. The realization that the only thing separating us from whoever was out there was a thin wooden door was terrifying. We installed cameras the very next day, and though life eventually returned to normal, I still think about that night whenever I hear an unexpected knock. The rain, the voice, the footsteps, those memories will stay with me forever. My wife Cheryl and I own a corn farm in Buckingham, Iowa. It's a simple life, peaceful and quiet, but not without its challenges. Cheryl and I grew up in the farming world. It's all we've ever known. Days are filled with hard work, early mornings, and an endless horizon of golden crops. But nights here are something else entirely. The isolation that feels peaceful during the day can take on a darker, more ominous tone after the sun goes down. It was one of those nights in August 2018. A soft rain tapped against the windows as Cheryl and I wrapped up an evening with our neighbors, George and his wife, Linda. They live about half a mile down the road, and over the years they've become like family. Nights like this were common, sharing drinks, laughter, and maybe a few heated rounds of our favorite board games. That night, we'd all had a little too much wine, and around 11 p.m., George and Linda decided it was time to head home. Their drive was short and straight, so we didn't worry too much about the rain. After they left, Cheryl and I decided to unwind with a movie. We poured ourselves one last glass of wine and curled up on the couch. The movie was one we'd seen a dozen times before, but it didn't matter. There's a kind of comfort in familiarity, something predictable in an unpredictable world. We were just beginning to doze off when there was a knock at the door. I frowned, sitting up slightly. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Cheryl nodded slowly. "Who could that be?" she whispered. It wasn't just the hour that made the knock unusual. It was the fact that no one ever came unannounced. Out here, if someone needs something, they call first. It's an unspoken rule of country living. I muted the TV and we both sat in silence waiting. Another knock followed, louder this time. Over the sound of the rain, I thought I heard a voice, faint and muffled. It sounded like someone saying, "We need help." Cheryl sat up straighter, her face tense. "Don't open it," she said firmly, grabbing my arm. "Something doesn't feel right." Her words gave me pause. I nodded but stood up anyway. "I'll just ask who it is," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. Cheryl didn't look convinced, but she stayed on the couch, watching me closely as I approached the door. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice firm but wary. "Oh, thank God," a man's voice answered. "Can you open up? We're lost." "Lost?" That didn't make any sense. You don't just get lost out here, especially not on a straight road like ours. "Who's we?" I asked. "My wife and I," the man replied. I glanced back at Cheryl, who was shaking her head vigorously. Something about the voice felt wrong, forced, like he was trying too hard to sound calm. "Can your wife say something?" I asked, hoping to catch him off guard. There was a long pause before the man finally answered. "She's not next to me right now." A chill ran down my spine. Cheryl mouthed, "Call someone." Her fingers hovered over her phone, ready to dial. I wanted to believe this was just some misunderstanding, maybe even a prank. "George, is that you?" I asked, trying to inject some levity into the situation. George was known for his practical jokes, and it wouldn't be entirely out of character for him to pull something like this. The voice hesitated before replying, "Yeah." But this time his tone was deeper, almost annoyed. My stomach dropped. This wasn't George. "Prove it," I said sharply. "What's your wife's name?" "That's a trick question," the man snapped. His tone had shifted again, edgy and defensive. I took a step back from the door, my heart racing. "Stay here," I whispered to Cheryl. She nodded, clutching her phone tightly. I grabbed mine and quickly dialed George's number. When he answered, his voice was groggy. "Hey, what's up?" "George," I said, keeping my voice low. "Are you at my front door right now?" "What?" "No," he replied, now fully alert. "Why?" "There's someone here pretending to be you," I said. "He's trying to get me to open the door." George didn't hesitate. "Stay inside. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Don't open the door for anyone." I hung up and turned back to Cheryl. "He's on his way," I said. "Call 911. She was already dialing. The knocking started again, louder this time. "We just need to use a phone," the man shouted. The pleading tone was gone, replaced by something colder, more demanding. "I have a shotgun," I yelled back. "If you don't leave, I'll use it." The house fell silent, but then we heard footsteps circling the porch. The sound of boots on the wooden deck made my pulse quicken. Cheryl gasped as one of the windows rattled. Someone was trying to open it. "Leave us alone!" Cheryl screamed, her voice cracking. She was still on the phone with the dispatcher, her hands shaking as she tried to explain what was happening. I bolted upstairs to grab my shotgun from the closet. My hands fumbled with the shells as I loaded it, the adrenaline making it hard to focus. I could hear the footsteps outside, moving closer to the back of the house. Moments later, there was pounding at the door, followed by George's voice shouting, "It's me! Open up!" Relief flooded through me as I rushed to unlock the door. George stepped inside, his shotgun at the ready. "I didn't see anyone on the way over," he said, his eyes scanning the room. We waited together until the police arrived. It felt like an eternity, but when we finally saw the flashing lights of a patrol car, it was like a weight had been lifted. The officer did a quick sweep of the property but didn't find anyone. "You should think about installing cameras," he said. "It's a good deterrent." The next morning, Cheryl and I went into town and bought a security system. Cameras went up on every corner of the house, covering the porch, the driveway, and the fields. It was a sobering reminder of how vulnerable we were out here, miles away from help. To this day, I still wonder what their intentions were. Were they trying to rob us? Harm us? Or was it something else entirely? Whatever it was, I'll never forget the sound of those footsteps on the porch, the knock at the door, and the voice on the other side. It's a reminder that even in the quietest corners of the world, danger can still find you.